Hi, this is Judith Gallardo de Cisneros, coming to you once again from Circle to Grace. And I'm grateful that you could join me today. Today our subject matter is a very important subject that affects many people. And it affects you to the point that sometimes you feel that you are not yourself. And this subject is in regards to domestic violence and sexual assault, and the effects of domestic violence and sexual assault, and how it affects a person that goes through something like this, which creates trauma, PTSD, and there are other forms of trauma. We do know that. But today we will be talking about domestic violence, DV, and sexual assault, SA. And we will start, as always, with prayer. And we ask that today we come together, not just mentally and in conversation, we also come together spiritually, because I understand that this subject is very heavy for many people. And so I want to come together, and we will pray first before we start our presentation. My prayer of preference from St. Francis de Assisi, who lived a difficult life, not because it was difficult, but it's because he made the wrong choices, and it caused difficulties in his life. He finally made a change when he realized that his behavior was not serving him, and he made a change for something different, something better, something higher, which was to give his heart to God and follow the teachings of Christ, but follow the ways of what God had in plan for him. And so we start now. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. We will continue to the prayer to the Holy Spirit. And at this time, with this subject matter, I would invite you to open your hearts and ask for healing, not just for you if you need it, but also for humanity. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, and enkindle in them the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. O God, who by the light of the Holy Spirit did instruct the hearts of the faithful, grant that by the same Holy Spirit we may be truly wise and ever enjoy his consolations. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. This is a tough subject to talk about. I want to be honest. It is a tough subject for me and for many people to hear. I would invite you to pick up a pen and a blank piece of paper, or something you can color. On a piece of paper you can draw, or you can doodle as I'm talking. This tends to help with some of the viewers that might be triggered or get triggered. This may help alleviate some of that anxiety, or that yes, this will help alleviate some of the anxiety, or if you're being triggered, it will help ground you. And it's important when people suffer trauma to learn how to ground yourself, or learn how to be grounded. And when you are triggered, learn how to ground yourself again. And doodling and coloring is a way to be able to get through difficult conversations, but it's also a way to help ground you. Okay? So I will begin. What is domestic violence? Domestic violence is when a person or perpetrator deliberately or under the influence affects an individual person for an end goal. To take power and control away from the victim, or the victims once they've gone through difficulties. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term. They become known as survivors because now they're living a life at a different level where their intention is to survive. But I don't want you just to survive. I want you to thrive. And I want you to be able to survive and move on to thrive in your life so that you become free once again, understanding the dignity and beauty that you are. Domestic violence is the willful intimidation, physical assault, battery, sexual assault, and or other abusive behavior as part of a systematic pattern of power and control perpetrated by one intimate partner or person against another. So this is seen in effects with intimate partners, or it could be a stranger against somebody else. It includes physical violence, sexual violence, threats, and emotional, psychological abuse. The frequency and severity of domestic violence varies dramatically. The forms or types of domestic violence include physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, teen abuse, emotional abuse, financial or economic abuse, multiple or combination abuse. It includes battery, isolation, sex trafficking, psychological abuse, FGM, which is known as female genital mutilation, threat of control of children. So many times a spouse will threaten the other that they will leave them and take their children. And many times a victim or a survivor will stay in the situation because they want to protect their children and they feel that they have nowhere else to go. There are facts and statistics I want to talk to you about as well so that you know them. These facts and statistics are updated every 5 to 10 years, and you can also review them in the CDC. Currently in the CDC, the facts are not updated with what we have going on right now, which is COVID, in regards to abuse and domestic violence going up. We do not have the exact numbers yet. In the United States, an average of 20 people experience intimate partner physical violence every minute. So it's 20 people every minute experiencing this. This equates to more than 10 million abuse victims annually. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence. Intimate partner contact, sexual violence, and or intimate partner stalking with impacts such as injury, fearfulness, post-traumatic stress disorders, use of victim services, contraction of sexually transmitted diseases, and much more. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men report having experienced severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. This includes a range of behaviors and in some cases might not be considered domestic violence. The range of behaviors include slapping, shoving, pushing, and in some cases might not be considered domestic violence. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 25 men have been injured by an intimate partner. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 12 men have experienced contact sexual violence by an intimate partner. 1 in 10 women have been raped by an intimate partner. The data is unavailable on male victims, and the reason is that males tend to not report their cases like a woman would. and some women do not report their cases at all. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 28 men have been stalked. Stalking causes the target to fear that she or he or someone close to her or him will be harmed or killed. On a typical day, domestic violence hotlines nationwide receive over 20,000 calls. An abuser's access to a firearm increases the risk of intimate partner femicide by 400%. Intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crimes. Intimate partner violence is most common against women between the ages of 18 to 24. 19% of intimate partner violence involves a weapon. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 59 men in the United States is raped during his or her lifetime. 9.4% of women in the United States experience intimate partner sexual assault in their lifetimes. Over 43 million women and about 38 million men experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner in their lifetime. 19.3 million women and 5.1 million men in the United States have been stalked. 66.2% of female stalking victims reported stalking by a current or former intimate partner. In regards to homicides, 1 in 3 female murder victims and 1 in 20 male murder victims are killed by intimate partners. A study of intimate partner homicides found 20% of the victims were family members or friends of the abused partner, neighbors, persons who intervened, law enforcement responders, or bystanders. So many times the homicides are the people that are injured and killed, the people that are killed because they were trying to help a survivor get away, or they're innocent bystanders, or they're part of the police, or they're part of the ambulance it could be an ambulance driver, it could be nursing, it could be a doctor that are helping somehow the victim regarding a situation and end up being part of the homicides. 72% of all murder-suicides are perpetrated by intimate partners. 94% of murder-suicide victims are females. The more times the victim returns to her or his abuser, the higher the probability of death. The abuser becomes angrier every single time. Why this matters? Why does this information matter? It matters because domestic violence is prevalent in every community and affects all people regardless of age, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, gender, race, religion, or nationality. Physical violence is often accompanied by emotionally abusive and controlling behavior as part of a much larger systematic pattern of dominance and control. Domestic violence can result in physical injury, psychological trauma, and even death. The effects of domestic violence. The devastating consequences of domestic violence can cross generations and last a lifetime. The devastating consequences of domestic violence can cross generations from child to child to parent to child to child to child to grandchildren. It will continue on if we don't put a stop to this. The devastating consequences of domestic violence can cross generations and last a lifetime. In regards to physical and mental effects, domestic violence brings on mental difficulties and physical difficulties. Victims of domestic violence are at increased risk of contracting HIV or other STDs due to forced intercourse and or prolonged exposure to stress. Intimate partner victimization is correlated with a higher rate of depression and suicidal behavior and very high stress levels. Only 34% of people who are injured by intimate partners receive medical care for their injuries. In regards to economic effects, the victims of domestic violence lose a total of 8 million days of paid work per year, the equivalent of 32,000 full-time jobs. Intimate partner violence and domestic violence is estimated to cost the U.S. economy between $5.8 billion and $12.6 billion annually, up to 0.125% of the national gross domestic product. Between 21 to 60% of victims of intimate partner violence lose their jobs due to reasons stemming from the abuse. Between 2003 and 2008, 142 women were murdered in their workplace by a former or current intimate partner. This amounts to 22% of workplace homicides among women. The emotional effects of domestic violence include that the survivor or the victim wants the abuse to end, but not the relationship. So these are emotional effects. These are the reactions that the survivor or the abused has in their mind. They want the abuse to end, but not the relationship. Why? Because there's a distortion in their heart and their mind. They don't know how to get out of it. They want the abuse to end, but not the relationship. They feel isolated. They feel depressed. They are unaware of what services are available to help them. They may be embarrassed of their situation. They fear judgment or stigmatization if they reveal the abuse. They deny or minimize the abuse or make excuses for the abuser. They still love their abuser, and so they will not react or act against them. They withdraw emotionally. They distance themselves from family or friends. They may be impulsive or aggressive. They feel financially dependent on their abuser. They feel guilt related to the relationship. They feel shame. They have anxiety. They have suicidal thoughts. They abuse alcohol or drugs many times to help them get through the day. Some do, some don't. They're hopeful that their abuser will change and or stop the abuse. They have religious, cultural, or other beliefs that reinforce staying in the relationship. There is nothing and no one, whether it's psychological or a religious or a religion, they will not force you to stay when it's the best or the better of the other or the best of all, for the best of the human person, for the dignity of the person. They will not force that person that's being abused to stay in that relationship. Studies have shown that things have changed. Even religious circles and religions understand the effects of abuse better than they did many years past. They have religious, cultural, or other beliefs that reinforce staying in the relationship. And we need to help people know that there are options, and because you are married or you are religious, it doesn't mean you need to stay in an abusive relationship. Have no support from friends or family. Some of them have no support from friends or family. Some of them fear cultural, community, societal backlash that may hinder escape or support for them. So they're afraid that culturally or in their community, they're gonna at the society level, they're gonna backlash them. They're gonna turn their backs on them, or that they're going to hinder a possible escape or not give them support. There will be lack of support. Domestic violence affects all aspects of one's life, and it affects all aspects of the victim's life or the survivor's life. When abuse victims are able to safely escape and remain free from their abuser, they often survive with long-lasting and sometimes permanent effects to their mental and physical health, relationships with friends, family, and children. Their career and their economic well-being can be greatly affected. Victims' reactions will fall into 3 categories. In coping, they learn to cope. They become more placating the abuser and enduring. They learn different strategies within themselves to learn to cope with the abuser, with their abuser. They learn managing skills. They anticipate the abuser's moods, and that's part of survival. They learn to anticipate abusers' moods, modify their own behavior so as not to arouse anger in the abuser. They attempt to control situations that lead to violence, divert attention from the abuse through religion or other activities, and they learn in resisting that they create consequences for the abuser, such as arrest, seek outside help, hit back, or strike preemptively. They take overt and covert actions to end or escape the abuse, and many other things that they do to learn as a survivor to control behavior and their environment. Domestic violence and its effects on children is that it becomes a learned behavior. Research shows that children who have come from a violent home are susceptible to repeat that cycle of violence. So if you are a parent and you are abusing your spouse or your significant other, your child is in that environment. You are teaching your child to become an abuser. Children that grow up in violent homes are 5 times more likely to become batterers or survivors themselves than are children from non-violent homes. Children adopt the characteristics of their role models and can be aggressive outside the home. There is also a tremendous amount of violence within our culture, in the media, on the streets, which reinforces violent behavior as an acceptable outlet for anger, which it is not acceptable. It is not okay. Children's common feelings and reactions are the following. They feel responsible for the abuse. They take blame for what their parents are doing. Or if a parent is injuring the other parent, they will take responsibility for that abuse and blame themselves. They feel anxiety. They feel embarrassment. They feel guilt. They feel grief, ambivalence. They have fear of abandonment. They start demanding attention in different ways. They have fear of being harmed. They start acting out and they withdraw. The most vulnerable in our society are people with disabilities, the elderly, and our children. One of the things I want to tell you that if you were a victim of domestic violence and sexual assault and you are now a survivor, I want you to know that through it all that you have dignity and that you are greatly loved, and that I am sorry if you have gone through these difficulties. I'm sorry that somebody has hurt you, and I'm sorry that you have had to go through that. I want you to know that it is not your fault. Remember, it is not your fault. It is not the fault of the victim or the survivor. And there is nothing that you could do differently or not do that would change the person, because the person's actions and reactions are their own. They have chosen to take action against you, and misbehave or do things that are not acceptable. It doesn't matter how the behavior came. It is not acceptable, and it is not the right way to behave. And so it is not your fault. And my prayers go out to you. Now let's talk about healing. There are forms and different things that you could do to heal and to try to obtain healing and heal your mind, heal your body, heal your soul. It is noted that victims with trauma or victims or survivors, it's interesting that the body and the mind works amazing, because you think that you can't forget what happened to you. It was difficult. In your heart, you feel it. In your mind, you think it. But it's also affecting your soul. And your body has memories. It creates memories. It's within you. And there's a healing process that I invite you to consider to start healing through it all. The healing can come in different forms. There's forms of healing that come, whether it's counseling, it could be group or individual counseling. You can learn self-defense classes. You can take those classes for self-defense to build yourself up and build up your self-esteem and confidence. You can even take dancing classes, prayer. It is highly recommended, even through the CDC and through the healing process, through sexual assault, through domestic violence, through trauma, through PTSD, that the survivor, it's important, and the survivors are advised to have a religion, to follow a religion, to pray, or if you don't have a religion, to pray. And it's interesting that society tends to go secular in so many things. But when something has happened to you, it goes full circle, as in circle to grace, that you also pick up prayer in your life as one of the steps of healing. And I find that very interesting. They also recommend meditation so that you see yourself healed and you see yourself in a better light, in light, where you should be. The arts are recommended, that we learn to, for those of us that are not artists, that we learn to color in coloring books or coloring pages, learn to draw, learn to paint. Even acting helps release some of this trauma, because you're looking forward to something that you're going to create. So I find that with the damage that can happen within your heart and your soul, in your mind, that you get to counter it in a way that is beautiful. So with music, singing, learning to play an instrument is always a wonderful therapy measure. Dancing, like I had said before, journaling is always excellent, because you're able to express yourself and bring down write down in paper your thoughts and your feelings, your anxieties, and you put them down. And it's so important because it's a form of release. So it's a wonderful way. If you're not able to do these other things, that's one of the great options as well. And then exercising because it releases your chemicals. It releases the chemicals in your body that will allow you to feel positive again, to feel good that you did something for yourself. And that's positive. So there's different ways that we can look at, like what are signs of somebody that is abused. What are the signs of abuse? And it's important that you take notice when you think that there are signs of abuse. Try to look at other people, look towards children, be a guide in helping people. And I have talked before about our human dignity. And if we see that there's a situation through the church, there's training called Virtus, protecting God's children. And it's important that we look towards helping each other and looking out for our little ones and looking out for the vulnerable, to see how we can help them if there's a situation. So always know that an abuser can be anyone. They come from all groups, all cultures, all religions, all economic levels, and all backgrounds. So there's not a specific look to an abuser. They can be your neighbor, your pastor, your friend, your child's teacher, a relative, a co-worker. It can be anyone. It is important to know that the majority of abusers are only violent with their current or past intimate partners. What traits do abusers have in common? An abuser often denies the existence or minimizes the seriousness of violence and its effect on the victim and other family members. So they downplay the abuse that they do to you, and they act like it wasn't that bad. You're just crying for nothing, or you're making a big deal about it. And I'll tell you, even mental abuse and verbal abuse, they can say, well, I didn't mean it, or, well, you shouldn't make me angry, and if you didn't do that, I wouldn't do this. But they always try to downplay it, and you need to be aware of that. An abuser objectifies the victim and often sees them as their property or sexual objects. It's interesting because an abuser has low self-esteem and feels powerless and ineffective in the world. And that's interesting because their behavior is to take power and control from their victim. But it comes back because an abuser has low self-esteem and feels powerless and ineffective in the world. And that's where it comes from. So when they say, I don't need help, they do need help. They refuse to get help, or they refuse to accept. But there's a reason that they're behaving this way. He or she may appear successful, but internally they feel inadequate. And you need to remember that. Please be aware. An abuser externalizes the causes of their behavior. They blame their violence on circumstances, such as stress, their partner's behavior, a bad day, on alcohol, drugs, or other factors. These are just excuses. They are behaving as they are behaving. An abuser may be pleasant and charming between periods of violence and is often seen as a nice person to others outside the relationship. We need to really be aware that abusers tend to be somewhat narcissistic. So they behave a certain way with public, with others, even family members. But when there is a situation of abuse with the family, within the family and the immediate family and maybe their spouse, their behavior with their spouse is very different from their behavior with everybody else. And that's why it's so hard to notice that somebody's being abused, because sometimes the spouse will not release it, will not show it, or they're too embarrassed, too ashamed to, and they hide it, or they protect somehow the abuser and cover their tracks. Or many times when there's violence involved, the female or the person that's abused will cover with makeup or not go out so that people don't know what the abuser has done. What are the warning signs of an abuser? The red flags and warning signs of an abuser include, but are not limited to, extreme jealousy, unpredictability, cruelty to animals, extremely controlling behavior, possessiveness, a bad temper, verbal abuse, controls all the finances, antiquated beliefs about roles of women and men in relationships, forced sex or disregard of their partner's unwillingness to have sex, sabotage of birth control methods, or refusal to honor agreed upon methods, blaming the victim for anything bad that happens, sabotage or obstruction of the victim's ability to work or attend school, abuse of other family members, the children, grandchildren, or pets, accusations of the victim flirting with others or having an affair, control of what the victim wears and how they act, demeaning the victim either privately or publicly, embarrassment of humiliation of the victim in front of others, harassment of the victims at work. And it's important that you consider all of these factors and that you look at helping the vulnerable and focus on that. And if you are one that is an abuser, then I would encourage you to seek help, because not only are you destroying innocent people, you're destroying yourself. Whether you realize it or not, you're also hurting yourself. And in the long run, I've seen many abusers live very lonely lives. You end up alone because you push away everybody that loves you and cares for you. And in regards to myth busting, many times we think that because we think an abuser should look a certain way and they should talk a certain way, and maybe they should be poor, maybe they should be rich, or they do have nice cars or they don't have nice cars. So there's myths that I think, because we don't know better or we're not educated on this subject, sometimes we assume certain things, and it's just because we don't have an education on them. Many times they will say that people who stay in abusive relationships are masochistic, and she enjoys it or she would not stay in the relationship. The reality is, it is very difficult to leave a battering or emotionally controlled relationship. A survivor of domestic violence may be reluctant to leave for a complex set of factors, such as shame, economic dependency, insecurity about supporting their children on their own, love situations, shame, economic dependency, insecurity about supporting their children alone, love or concern for the abuser. She may have to give up her home, possessions, work, and friends. Everything. I've known survivors that have had to relocate in order to survive. And it causes a lot of heartache, a lot of broken hearts, because they leave good friends, good family, and sometimes they have to leave children behind to survive. And I'm not saying little children, I'm talking about grown children. Husbands and wives have always fought. It is natural and therefore cannot be bad. The reality is, naturally, there is occasional conflict in every family, but the distinguishing factor in battering is the violence and the pattern of power and control that the perpetrator is trying to take from the survivor or the victim. Some people provoke arguments and deserve to be beaten. The reality is, no one deserves to be beaten. Provocation is not what causes a violent episode. Domestic violence can be described as the cycle of violence. This cycle begins with the period of tension. The tension heightens and finally explodes in violence. These explosions have nothing to do with the survivor's behavior. They have to do with the abuser's behavior and their reactions to life and reality and things that are happening in their own life. Batterers are psychopaths. The reality is that batterers may lead normal lives in all respects, except for their inability to control aggressive impulses. This includes lawyers, doctors, teachers, bus drivers, mechanics. It includes everybody, plumbers, everybody across the board. So the person does not have a certain background, certain upbringing. The abuser has a situation where they will abuse. That's who they are until they get proper treatment. Alcohol abuse causes violence. The reality is that alcohol does not create batterers. However, alcohol can make batterers more dangerous. Drinking lowers control over the inhibitions, which would usually prevent someone from being violent. However, according to statistics, 1/3 of batterers do not drink at all. Another 1/3 have an alcohol problem, but a batterer when they are sober or drunk, and the other third are violent only when they are drunk. There are many shelters and resources available to victims of domestic violence. Unfortunately, the reality is many services do exist. However, there are not enough to handle the volume of cases. Because of the lack of resources nationally, 50% of all homeless women and their children are on the streets because they have escaped violence in their home. While shelters do exist, there are not enough beds to be able to place every case. Shelters run on very limited funding, often requiring them to adhere strictly to those cases that are eligible under their funders' requirements. There's been a lot of cases that I've helped with, and it's very heartbreaking to look for a shelter for somebody in need and you cannot find one. It is very heartbreaking and very difficult. So yes, we do need more shelters. It is important for a survivor also to have a safety plan. A personal plan of safety is developed by the survivor with the assistance from a counselor, advocate, the law enforcement, and/or their support system. It is a tool that is used to evaluate options and reduce risk of harm to the survivor and any children to ultimately promote the most sense of safety. They're very important. Safety planning is about exploring options and choices for the survivor. We should all support a survivor with any option they choose. Why? Because it is their power and control. They need to decide for themselves. We don't take their power and control. We cannot decide for them. We cannot decide for anybody unless we are raising children and we make the best choices for our children when they are young. And as they grow, we teach them to make choices and hopefully make good choices. Because our children, us individually, we have our own choices to make. And we cannot make choices for other people as adults. We must discuss things thoroughly or gently or patiently. Because ultimately, when we make choices and we are aggressive and make choices for other people, we are taking their power and control. And that is theirs. And we can't get in their space. We cannot affect people in that way. And it's important to understand where that's coming from. It's not to say that you don't support somebody during a difficulty and maybe give some advice, but we also have to allow the person to make the choice and respect them and love them. Remember that every safety plan will be different. A support system involving family, friends, counselors, members of one's church can be positive for survivors to know that they are surrounded by loved ones, that they will give them the love, the compassion, and kindness that they need. They need support from persons that can be sensitive to their feelings, especially when they may feel overwhelmed after being triggered. And it's so important. And sometimes we judge people and we say, oh, you're making a big deal about this. Oh, get over it. Or calm down. Sometimes we have to, it's more important, I think, to learn how to support somebody through being triggered to help ground them again than to make them feel bad because they feel that way. It's so important for their well-being, and they grow from it. Now, vicarious trauma. Vicarious trauma is also known as compassion fatigue. It is the latest term that describes the phenomenon generally associated with the cost of caring for others. Vicarious trauma occurs as a trauma exposure response. Professionals in the healthcare industry, mental health, social services, legal services, first responders, and caregivers are at higher risk of experiencing vicarious trauma. Family members, loved ones, and friends, many times through seeing a person they love suffer or even a stranger off the streets, they can be triggered and be affected by vicarious trauma. In self-care, the self-care is important for survivors, and it's actually important for all of us, for the family members and children of survivors, all healthcare workers and first responders. And many times when you feel anxious, maybe you have not gone through trauma, but you feel anxious or you feel overwhelmed, that means that you need to stop and look at what's going on and give self-care to yourself. Take a moment to pray, take a moment to breathe, to meditate, to go into gratitude, and to be grounded, to ground yourself again and be aware of where you're at, to be present, and to go into gratitude. Self-care is generally necessary for everyone to keep a good balance in your life. It is particularly important for everyone to learn to recognize when you are feeling as if you've been triggered or suffering from vicarious trauma, to better learn how to help yourself. The more you know yourself, the easier you will learn to create a way to release the trigger and find balance in your life. And it's really important because it could be as simple as taking a walk, drinking more water, keeping yourself hydrated, keeping yourself healthier, looking for a way to have better mental health where you're more at peace. So there are many options and things that you could do to take care of yourself. Physical self-care, psychological self-care, emotional self-care, spiritual self-care, personal self-care, and professional self-care. And it's important that you consider all of these aspects to have life balance so that you feel more balanced in your life and you don't feel so overwhelmed all the time. So make sure you do things to take care of yourself. Take good care of yourself and do things for yourself. Even moms that are so busy and dads that are so busy, I would recommend that you give yourself an hour a day, that you give yourself some time, and as a couple to get away together, to do things with your kids, to create situations that are more peaceful, not so anxious, that you don't feel anxious about things but at peace. For survivors that are searching to thrive, and anybody that wants to thrive in their life after having difficulties, know that a survivor does not want to stay suffering. They just don't know how to pull out of that cycle of mental torture, of anguish, of anxiety and pain in their heart, the anguish of their soul. They don't know how to correct that. And it takes a lot of compassion and love, and for us to have charity for others, to be charitable towards others that are hurting, even if we don't know their situation, but that we can learn to be kind and judge less, but learn to be more active in being supportive. Survivors do not want to stay suffering. They do want to heal. They just don't know how. And survivors searching to thrive, we need to understand first what's going on, what has happened. It seems that with domestic violence and sexual assault, there is a distortion, a mental distortion, a distortion of the mind, a distortion of the soul. There is also a disconnect that happens between the person, their mind, their soul, their physical being, and the spirit of their connection to their Creator. What occurs is an intrinsic evil, best understood in metaphysics and existentialism psychology. all things become questionable. All things become mixed and confused. All things become misunderstood. What was once is no longer, and if it is in a confusion state. The person, the survivor, affected by domestic violence or sexual assault, in this distortion of the mind begins to question everything. Everything affects them. They become more sensitive. They become more overwhelmed. Everything becomes a question or is questionable. Their trust in everybody shatters. The person feels shattered. In addition to everything being questionable, everything becomes a question of, even if it's subconscious, because there is a disconnect of something that has been broken within them, or they feel broken. They become more susceptible to be hurt again and attacked because now they feel themselves as a victim. They are sometimes unaware and disconnected to reality. As they go into survival state, they are educated and informed and understand that their way of being and being their love and understand that their way of being and being their lovely self can still exist. There can still be hope for a better future, for a wonderful, thriving life. But they must put in the work with hope and with a vision for the future and all that is taught to them. And all comes through healing of different forms: psychological therapy, group or individual sessions, leadership training and healing, as well as metaphysical and existential healing. There is the form of support for domestic violence survivors through healing with the arts, healing through creativity and creating different things, healing through new knowledge of experiential things that are beautiful, that allow them to breathe and experience beauty once more as they create, so that they stop feeling shattered and broken. There are many possibilities of healing. The biggest step for the survivor is the education and the understanding to break the myth that they are not at fault and that they have not done something that has caused this assault or this violence upon their person. As they grow and they begin to understand that this is not something that they initiated or that should have been initiated due to their state of being or their situation or whatever reason that they were attacked or they were affected. No one has the right to take someone else's power, someone else's confidence, someone else's humanity. No one. No one has a right to take someone else's dignity, for we are created in human dignity by a creator that created us with love, and that is who we are. At the root of who we are humans created by the Creator with love and dignity, and with a gift that was given to us to be co-creators with God and to create a beautiful life. Spirituality is one of the biggest understandings, or the biggest besides education. Spirituality is one of the biggest encouraged forms of healing, to find sense of oneself again, to find purpose, your purpose. For we are created for so much more than the hurt that has been imposed upon the domestic violence or sexual assault survivor. They will learn to understand, as we will all learn to understand, that everything that has happened to them in the domestic violence or sexual assault situation is not of their fault. The survivor must also learn responsibility. We must take responsibility for things that we have done and learn to change those things and learn to change them. An example could be a young man or young woman that takes excessive alcohol. It's not to say that that's a good reason for someone to attack them or hurt them, but it is to say that as human dignity within us, that we can make better choices in what we do and where we put ourselves, and if we put ourselves in better situations rather than bad situations. We still can have a choice, and we still have a choice. For example, if we are afraid and we don't have the proper training for self-defense or the proper understanding of why a person might become a victim of an attack by someone that attacks them outside walking. Many times it is the demeanor of the person that is attracting the person that is looking for a victim. Confidence, understanding how you can walk better, stronger, your position or your stance is very important. Believe it or not, we do give out certain vibes by how we stand, how we sit, and how we talk. Survivors are encouraged to take self-defense classes to build up their confidence. It is an internal rebuilding and physical rebuilding. If you know how to protect yourself better, your mind will prepare itself, and then your body will follow. It's important because the mind is so strong that the body will follow what the mind creates and what you think. Also, repetition will give you automatic response reflexes in times of need. For example, in the book As a Woman Thinketh, it explains how we were created in a way that all that we think and dream and create first in our minds, that our body only follows what we want it to do. The body does not know better, but yet if we create it in our minds and take action, we will see the results of what we are creating, whether it is good or whether it is bad. So be mindful of what you think and what you are created and what you are creating in your mind. Catholic social teaching is part of striving to be better. The Church has 7 important teachings that are derived and taken from the Scriptures that are important to learn and to reflect upon them, mainly to understand what is meant by them, to live them out, to create good choices and good decisions in your life, so that what you do affects everybody in a positive way. Life, the first one is life and dignity for all human persons. So you treat everybody with human dignity, starting from yourself. The call to family, community, and participation. It's a way for you to express the common good for all, the rights and the responsibilities of all humans. This also has to do with the common good for all. The option for the poor and most vulnerable. It is part of the option for the poor and also common good, and also to support the vulnerable, the most vulnerable, and to take care of them and look out for them. The dignity of work and the rights of workers. It has to do with human dignity and the common good. Solidarity. Solidarity because we are all one family under the Creator. We are creatures of the Creator, and we are all brothers and sisters at the level of all humanity in the world. Care for God's creation. It is for the common good that we should care about nature and all that is around us on earth, that we protect the earth as we protect the vulnerable as well. Matthew 25, on the parable of the Last Judgment, tells us, on what criteria will we be judged by God? Based on how we treat the more vulnerable and marginalized persons. For I was hungry and you fed me, thirsty and you gave me drink. Lord, when did we see you? For whatever you did or did not do for one of the least of your brothers or sisters, you did not do for me. So, let us take a moment. I've told you many things, and I've talked to you about. My goal has been to educate you on domestic violence and sexual assault and the effects. I hope that this information has helped you in any form to better your life or the life of others and the people you love in your community and all humanity. Please close your eyes. Close your eyes and put yourself in a state of bliss. Let us release everything that we have received, but more, let us release all the negativity, all the hurt, all the memories that came back. So breathe in and exhale. Breathe in and exhale. Breathe in and exhale. And close your eyes as I read to you. And visualize. Visualize as I tell you, the grass is green. The sky is blue. The water is cool. And the sun is warm. Breathe in and exhale and release all the tension. Breathe in life. One more time. Breathe in. Breathe in life and healing. And release one more time and release all the tension and hurt and pain. And keep your eyes closed for a moment and visualize. There is something that I want to read to you. It is a poem I wrote many years ago in my own despair. I went into despair and then I went into healing. And I had to write this poem because it talked about how I saw other possibilities for survivors. In this case, I use a female because I am a woman. But I would invite you men also to breathe in and exhale again. And look towards this poem and put yourself there. Even if I say the woman, I apologize. But please look at it as you are the amazing human being on the other side of the mirror. As you are the amazing human being on the other side of the mirror. And when you look in the mirror, remind yourself how amazing you are. That you are a creature of the Creator. And the Creator made you with love and dignity. And I will read it to you now. And I hope you enjoy it. The goal is to help you heal. It is not to hinder you, but it's for you to create a beautiful life. It's called Woman in the Mirror, or Man in the Mirror. Once there was a woman who looked towards all these great women and said, I want to be powerful, courageous, full of life and loved. I want my family and my friends to see me, truly see me as they see them. See how their families and friends see them with all of their endless spirit of life, love, and power, and yet with an endless sense of peace. How great it must be to smile and have someone smile back at you as they do. She asked, how can I obtain that? As she stood in front of the mirror. Well, she looked in the mirror one day, and looking deep within, she could see all these amazing things that she so badly wanted happening right before her eyes. In the mirror on the opposite side of where she stood. It seemed as in a dream. She saw it. Her vision becoming so vivid, so real, that she could see it. It felt as if her vision began to flow through her veins. It was so inviting, so invigorating. Well, she took a step forward, and like magic, she stepped into all of her splendor, all that she truly is, all that she has always truly been. She became the woman instantly. As that woman evolved, she began to understand that she was always looking in the mirror. For all along, the only thing she had to do was to step into her vision and into her power. For remember that it is only a powerful person that can look at another and truly acknowledge another's power. Her power was always with her all along. Your power is also with you. Just step into it. Greatness is within you. Let it out. My love to you. Great healing. Great possibilities. Take this moment to reflect on the goodness of your life, even if there has been difficulties, and look towards healing and know that there is a better life waiting for you. And all you have to do is step into it and follow your vision. With God's graces and God's blessings, you will not just be a survivor, you will thrive in your life. And you can create a beautiful life again. I am grateful to you for spending this time with me. And I thank you for being a part of this session and for being a part of this time. Thank you again. And don't forget to come back again and circle to grace. This is Judith Gallardo de Cisneros. God bless.